Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us, taking an hour out of your afternoon to hop on this webinar with us. It's a beautiful day, and we've got just a lot of great information for you, an incredible panel of people joining us to talk about a really relevant and important topic. We've got a fast-paced and informative agenda, so lots of information coming your way. We'll move quickly. This hour will fly by. But we know it's a topic that's on everybody's mind today, so we're happy to talk about it. Look, the talent shortage is very real, and industrial training is a way we can mitigate this challenge. So again, we're thrilled to share some of the insights and resources, as well as hear from some of our special guests this afternoon. As always, our goal is to give you some really actionable ideas and tools that you can leverage in your organization. We are recording this webinar, so it's another tool for your toolbox. You'll get a copy of the recording emailed to you by the end of the week. That's going to come from info@labmidwest.com. So keep an eye out in your inbox for that. Also, since this is for you guys, if you have any questions for our presenters as they're going through their presentations, or you're hearing about what we have to share, feel free to use that Q&A box on your Zoom control panel to submit those questions. Since we have such a jam-packed agenda, we're going to keep all of those questions in the queue until the end of the webinar, where we've dedicated some special time just for Q&A. But at any time, you're welcome to submit questions. My name is Melissa Martin. I am with Lab Midwest. I will be moderating the webinar today. Happy to get things kicked off for us, but at this time, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Matt Kirkner. If you don't already know him, which most of you probably already do, Matt spent the majority of his career running manufacturing companies, all types of all sizes, and really saw a lot of this issue firsthand. He's got incredible knowledge and insights to share. He now runs Lab Midwest, which is our organization here putting on this webinar, and he's also the host of the Tech Ed podcast. You're going to hear a little bit about that this afternoon, but tons of great insights to share. Matt, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Melissa, for being a phenomenal moderator. It is awesome to be with all of you today on this webinar, talking about a topic that is really near and dear to my heart without question, and that being the one of industrial training. As Melissa just mentioned, I spent the better part of my career, 23 years as the Chief Executive Officer and a Chief Operating Officer in the field of manufacturing, running advanced manufacturing companies. You know, it used to be when we were looking at expanding a company, we would look first at, if we're moving into a new geography, what is the proximity to our customers? What is the proximity to our suppliers? Because those were the first two things that were really, really important to us when we were expanding our business. Then we would look for government incentives, and finally, we would look at all of the other variables. Well, that world is over with. And I can tell you, in working with tons and tons of companies all across the Midwest, all across the United States, the very first question that any company that is expanding is asking is, what is my ability to attract and retain a qualified workforce? And this is really important. As we're going to talk about today, manufacturing technology is changing at rates that we have never seen before. And it is absolutely incredible where we have been just in the last couple of years in terms of robotics and automation, now artificial intelligence and machine learning. Manufacturing technology is advancing at a phenomenal rate. We get to hear all about that, by the way, on the Tech Ed podcast. As Melissa mentioned, I get to host the Tech Ed podcast every single week. We are always talking to really, really interesting people. We've had more than 15 Fortune 500 CEOs join us on that podcast, telling us about the things that they're doing. Just 2 weeks ago, we recorded an episode that'll be coming out in the next week or so with Congressman Frank Lucas. Congressman Lucas is the chair of the U.S. House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. We've had senators, we've had assistant secretaries of labor, lots and lots of college and university presidents and provosts and chancellors. Every single week, we talk to really interesting people. Well, we had a guest who was in our podcast studio just recently who said some things that absolutely stuck with me and in many ways changed the way that I look at small, mid-size, and large manufacturing companies. And for somebody that's been in the world of manufacturing now for close to 30 years, that says a lot. His name was Asatosh Patti. Some of you may be familiar, in fact, many of you are familiar with his organization. It's called McKinsey & Company. When we think about consulting companies globally, there are 3 companies that control that market. The first one is Ernst & Young, the second one is Deloitte, and the third one is McKinsey. They are called the Big 3. These are the huge consulting companies that are doing all kinds of really cool consulting projects with organizations all around the globe. McKinsey is in that top 3, and they are the oldest of those 3 organizations. So Asatosh Patti is the managing director for North America for all of McKinsey. So he runs the entire continent for McKinsey, of this huge consulting company, and he joined us in the studio not too long ago. We were talking about his book, and this is a fascinating book. It's called The Titanium Economy. If you are not familiar or haven't read that book, I would suggest picking it up. It is all about this. It is all about all of these companies that I get to see every day, many of you get to see every day, but they're companies in many cases that nobody has ever heard of. And they're organizations that are owned by leaders who nobody has ever heard of. And they are making products in many cases that we didn't even know were products. It's this whole subculture of manufacturing that exists across the United States of America, small to mid-sized manufacturing companies that do incredible things. Would you believe, according to Asatosh Patti and his co-authors of this book, 70% of the research and development that happens in and around the American economy is done by what he calls titanium economy companies, these small to mid-sized companies that are doing unbelievable things in terms of advancing technology. So we had an awesome conversation with Asatosh Patti as he was spending time here in our Tech Ed podcast studio. Let me tell you a few of the things that we talked about and a few of the things that he goes over in his book that I think are really, really important for our topic of discussion today. The first thing he says is that industrial employers can't fill open jobs fast enough, and the persistent talent gap for jobs at all levels has led to devastating results. I want to highlight 2 words in that paragraph. The first one is the word persistent. The truth of the matter is that we have had problems in our economy as far as a skilled workforce for a long, long time. I can remember being in CEO groups 20, 25 years ago, I'm not kidding, where we were sitting here talking about what we called the football through the fire hose. That means that we have these baby boomers who at the time were in their maybe 30s, 40s, and 50s, but were going to be over time aging out of the workforce. In other words, they were going to get to an age where they were retiring, and guess what? We didn't have enough of a population to fill the jobs that we were leaving behind. When we talk about the fact that we have a talent shortage here in the United States of America when it comes to advanced manufacturing, this problem is nothing new. We were talking about this 20 and 25 years ago. The problem was that many of us, myself included, when I was in manufacturing, figured that at some point we would solve the problem. Well, now what happened? Here we are in the year 2023, and nobody can find people, and it is creating tremendous, tremendous problems. So the first thing is, when we say persistent, that means it's been around for a while. This problem has been around and has been in the making for, like I said, a couple of decades, and it is not getting better anytime soon. The truth of the matter is that it's not like we have billions or millions of students that are graduating from high school, going to technical college, and coming into the workforce. We have way more jobs in the manufacturing economy today than we have people to fill them, and that problem is getting worse, not better. And so the truth of the matter is we have to pull out all the stops. We have to find every single opportunity for ourselves to find people and skill those people up into roles where they can add value in our organizations. And that's what this webinar today is all about. So in the past 10 years alone, believe it or not, in the past 10 years, 2.4 million industrial jobs went unfilled. That, according to Asatosh Patti, and he should know they are consulting with organizations all around the globe, and specifically in his case here in North America. And the truth is that we have had positions that have opened up in manufacturing because people have retired, or maybe some people left manufacturing for other careers. That has left a gap of 2.4 million people. That is 2.4 million machinists, 2.4 million maintenance technicians, 2.4 million electromechanical technicians, supervisors, machine operators, machine loaders, waste treatment technicians, and the list goes on and on and on. 2.4 million of those positions are open now in the US economy. We've left those positions unfilled. Well, what happens to a manufacturer when they can't fill a position? What happens to that manufacturer is they can't grow. So when I was in manufacturing, I could only take on a certain amount of work. We call that capacity. There are things that we could do to expand our capacity. We could invest in improving quality. We could run continuous improvement events to be able to streamline our manufacturing processes so that we could get more work done. We could certainly automate, and we did all those things. But the truth of the matter is, at some point, you need people to expand a business. And if you can't find the people, you can't take on new work. And that is what has happened to manufacturers all across the United States of America, is that they have been constrained in terms of being able to grow their businesses simply because they can't find the people to do the work if they get the work. And so they've had to constrain their level of growth. What does that mean for the American economy? You would be blown away at what that means for the American economy. According to Ashutosh Patti, his organization estimates that the US economy lost $2.5 trillion in the last 10 years. $2.5 trillion as a result of labor shortages. Now, let me tell you what that does. The first thing is that's GDP that we as a company, or we as a country rather, can't add to our bottom line. So that is gross domestic product that we could have been able to produce here in the United States that we were not able to produce because we could not find the people to do it. But what's more, in the world of manufacturing, we have what we call backward linkages. And so as an organization grows and expands and employs people, what is it doing? It is buying insurance. It is buying automobiles. It is renting office space. It is buying materials. It is employing people with its subcontractors, with its contract manufacturers. That is what we call the backward linkages in the world of manufacturing, and they drive the US economy. The other thing that drives the US economy from manufacturing is forward linkages. So all of these people that are working in manufacturing, and as we'll talk about here in just a moment, they make really, really good money. All of these people who are working in manufacturing, they don't just keep that money, they go out and spend it. They buy cars, they purchase entertainment, they go out to dinner, they pay to have their kids educated. Those are what we call the forward linkages in manufacturing and the forward linkages in our economy. So the truth of the matter is that those forward linkages are significant because of what people make when they're working in manufacturing. And I don't mean the products they make, I mean the money they make. Would you believe that the average manufacturing employee in my home state of Wisconsin, makes over $75,000 a year. And that is a full 40% more than the average non-farm payroll job here in the state of Wisconsin. And you will see that trend repeat itself over and over and over again across the US economy. People in manufacturing make great money, they spend that money, and that is what supports the United States economy in so many ways. So this $2.4 trillion that we've lost, that is a significant amount of money, and it is all because we haven't been able to find people in manufacturing. So according to Patti, when we say, let's tee up this question of how big of an issue is this in the US economy, and how big of an issue is this for manufacturing? He interviewed hundreds of manufacturers for this book. And the word here, the key word is every, we have it in caps. Every industrial leader that he spoke to for his book identified the labor shortage as an impediment to growth. Every single one of them is saying the shortage of labor is preventing our organization from growing. This is a really, really serious problem. I want to talk now about another guest that we had on the Tech Ed podcast. His name is Blake Moret. Many of you are familiar with Blake, and if you're not, you're familiar with his company, Rockwell Automation, manufacturer of industrial control systems, industrial automation systems, programmable logic controllers, variable frequency drives, and so on. Well, Rockwell Automation has been on a tear as far as expansion for the last several years, and they have been very acquisitive, meaning that they have been acquiring other companies, investing in other companies to help fuel their growth. One of those companies is Plex Systems. And in fact, we had Anthony Murray, who is the Vice President of Product Management at Plex Systems, on the podcast as well. Plex Systems released a report just recently called The State of Smart Manufacturing that everybody on this webinar should take a look at. The data that is in this report and the opportunities in terms of smart technology and manufacturing are absolutely overwhelming. So let's take a look at some of the things that they determined as a result of this survey that they did of over 1,300 advanced manufacturing companies in and around the United States of America. We hear a lot about machine learning and artificial intelligence. We heard nothing about that 5 years ago. In fact, a year ago, most of us didn't even know what ChatGPT was. Now everybody knows what ChatGPT is. Why? Because artificial intelligence and machine learning are having a huge impact across the economy. Would you believe, according to this report, that over 50% more manufacturers are using machine learning and AI this year compared to last year? In other words, the number of companies that are using artificial intelligence and machine learning in their organization increased by 50% over the course of the last 12 months. This is having a huge impact on the world of manufacturing, as are other technologies. How about the number of participants in the study that reported plans to use smart manufacturing in their organizations in the next year? What percentage do you think of organizations are considering using smart technology, smart manufacturing technology? The answer is 97%. Statistically, almost every single manufacturing company is implementing new smart device, smart sensor, and data analytics technology. Let me ask you another question. What remains a top concern and is the number one reason that manufacturers believe they can't outpace their competition? So if I'm a manufacturer and I am trying to get ahead of my competitor in my market space, what is the number one reason, according to this survey, that I can't outpace the competition? You guessed it, it is a skilled workforce. The lack of a skilled workforce is continuing to constrain manufacturing in and around the United States, and this survey screams it out. How about this question? By increasing the use of technology, our organization will hire more workers. So here's the thing. A couple of years ago, people were worried that robots were going to take all the jobs. Well, guess what? As organizations are adopting more technology in manufacturing, 31% of them say they are hiring more people because of that technology. They need to expand the number of people that are working in their organization because of their adaptation and adoption of technology. How about this one? By increasing the use of technology, our organization will need to repurpose workers into new roles. 36% say as they adopt new technology, they are repurposing their talent. What does that mean? We have to upskill and train that talent for their next job. So a lot of times when we're talking about access to talent, we think about how are we going to find those high school students or those technical college students that are trained and can come into our organizations. That is a great solution, but I will tell you that that in and of itself is never going to fix the talent gap. Never going to fix the talent gap. We have to look inside the four walls of our manufacturing operations. What percentage of your 2045 workers are already employed in manufacturing today? In other words, if you look forward to 2045 or about 22 years from now, what percentage of the people working in your organization are already working in your organization today? The answer is 80%. And those people are working in a world that is changing like crazy in terms of technology. So when we look at our solutions, we're looking at the advent of technology and how technology is totally transforming manufacturing. And we're also looking at the fact that the skilled workforce, we have a need to upskill the workforce, but we are not going to have enough people coming into manufacturing to fulfill all of the manufacturing jobs. So here's why this training thing is so important before I hand this back over to Melissa for a really, really interesting conversation. I believe we've had several sea changes in manufacturing over the course of my career. And the first one started with standardized quality. Standardized quality, this idea that we do what we say and we say what we do. This was huge in the 1990s with things like ISO and QS and TS and standardized quality systems. That effort and that change totally modified the way that we look at manufacturing. It totally revolutionized manufacturing. And then we had Kaizen and continuous improvement. That totally changed manufacturing as well, getting our employees engaged, getting our team members engaged in the work that we were doing. Those two changes totally revolutionized manufacturing. If you missed one of them, you struggled. And if you missed them both, I would argue you probably didn't survive the 90s and the early 2000s. Well, now we have three simultaneous changes in the form of Industry 4.0, artificial intelligence, and employee upskilling. And employers have to have their arms around all three of these. You need to understand how Industry 4.0 technology is going to totally transform your business. You need to understand how artificial intelligence is going to transform your business. And you need to upskill the next generation of the workforce and your talent, the talent inside your four walls, if you are going to remain competitive in the future. That's what this webinar is about. And with that, I am going to hand it back to Melissa, and let's learn how one amazing company addressed this challenge.
Thank you, Matt. And to our listeners, if you didn't already understand the pervasiveness of this issue, first of all, you're not alone. This is happening to every manufacturer everywhere, feeling the same issues that you're feeling too, and it's impacting our economy as a whole in tremendous ways. So thank you, Matt, for helping us to understand the impact that the skilled labor shortage is causing for basically all of America. So now how do we fix it, right? How do we do this employee training thing in a way that is successful, in a way that's accessible, and in a way that works and really provides ROI for our organization? And so we're bringing on just an incredible employer to share what they've done so far and what they plan to do in the future. So our special guest is Dan Mole. He is the technical training manager at Masters Gallery Foods here in Wisconsin. He'll tell you a little bit more about his organization and what they're doing in just a moment, but just a phenomenal story and just a great job that Dan has done spearheading the company's efforts to put together a training program for their own incumbent employees. And facilitating that discussion is our own Ivan Manuel. Ivan is our industrial business development executive who has been working with Dan and his team on this project. Ivan also works with companies large and small across the Midwest on this whole idea of incumbent workforce training. So Ivan and Dan, thank you for joining us. Ivan, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Melissa. Great introduction. I'm really excited to be here with you all and really highlight all the work that Dan and Tammy have done in creating a gold standard level training program at Masters Gallery. As Melissa mentioned, I work with companies of all sizes all throughout the Midwest, and really, what Dan and Tammy have built over the past, 2 years is really a benchmark that I use when going into these manufacturers to make suggestions and, the ultimately getting them where they want to be. So Dan, we're going to open up by we just want to learn a little bit more about your company, your team, and how did the conversation around training get started in the development of your program?
Well, Masters is it's a private label cheese packaging facility. We function under 2 different plants right now, and we have a maintenance team obviously at each facility. So the training discussion really came up because our technicians were asking for it. As the technology is changing and new lines are getting installed or upgraded, it's not this, the lines aren't what they used to be. So we were getting a lot of requests for training and, just internal conversations that we really needed to provide our employees with the chance to keep up with the technology that we were installing in our facilities. So there was a lot of research done, and we ended up going with kind of a blended learning option, kind of through Lab Midwest. So that was kind of why we came to the decision that we needed to do something, because nothing wasn't going to work.
Absolutely. And, I remember early on, a lot of changes kind of took place. We set a baseline and we continued to build upon that, but there was a lot of pivots, getting to where we are now and kind of going through trial and error, and so would you mind sharing a little bit about, your team's training strategy, just a 30,000 foot view of how you guys are building out a platform for training? What are the elements that make up that?
Yeah, so our training strategy really focuses on blended learning. We want to take the e-learning modules that we have access to and use that as kind of a foundational piece, the theory behind the equipment. And then we mix that with, hands-on, be it through trainers or out on the floor, that sort of thing, internal mentorship type of deals. I think that was all you really wanted.
Yeah, and so you mentioned e-learning. Can you elaborate on that part a little bit more? What does that look like? Are you talking like video, PDF document? What does that curriculum look like?
So we actually go through a company called Amatrol. They provide thousands of hours of online coursework that is, full. A lot of it is very interactive, and it is very well curated. There's a lot of work that goes into it that saves my team from having to do it.
Yeah.
And it ensures that it is always up to date. So we have them go through curriculums that we developed here in-house using Amatrol. And that gives them the foundational knowledge. They go through the online modules that gives all the information they're going to need. It blends in interactive portions, both on the computer and hands-on. But from an e-learning perspective, we go through that curriculums that match the needs of our company. And again, they stay up to date without us having to open an entire department to try to keep curriculums accurate to today's technology.
And just to kind of highlight that part a little bit, Dan, you and Tammy have kind of taken lead on the entire training front that you built out so far. So Amatrol has allowed you the flexibility to do that.
Yeah, that's allowed us to do some of those pivots you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really cool. And in an industry like where you work every single day, you can't sit a mechanic in front of a e-learning platform and then expect him to be able to replicate that on the floor. What are you guys' thoughts on hands-on training? How are you incorporating that into your program?
So the hands-on training portion is actually incredibly important to me, because as you kind of touched on, you can read the book, but that doesn't mean you're going to be able to go out there and do it. So we've purchased a fair few interactive trainers through Amatrol, as well as, again, we kind of target internal mentorship as well, just to get people the actual hands-on, apply what you learned through, Amatrol, or, through discussions with other technicians. Because at the end of the day, what really, really matters is the ability to go out there and fix that equipment when it's down, not just tell me what's wrong with it.
Yeah, no, that's a good point you make. Out of all the discussions that I have, and we've had these conversations too, troubleshooting has to be the hardest thing to teach and train on, because you don't want to wait until a problem arises to use that as a learning opportunity. So I really like that. What trainers or hands-on equipment are you utilizing currently?
We have that Skill Boss that's right there on the little PowerPoint slide. That is kind of an all-in-one pick and place robot type deal, but it allows us to kind of work with introductory level PLC stuff, HMIs, and then actual machine functions that, electric, pneumatic, robot sensors, all that good stuff. So it's a nice all-in-one package for quite a bit of stuff. And then we have more targeted stuff for, AC/DC motors, AC/DC electrical, pneumatic, PLC trainers, that sort of stuff. Things that they're actually going to see out on the floor before they're out there, because we're losing productivity time.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's really cool. And, so you guys are, customizing your curriculum, tying it to hands-on skills, to kind of add that added layer of training. What about certifications? Are you guys aligning your program to certifications, and what does that look like?
Yeah, so we take kind of the custom curriculums that we build, and some are set per technician level you're at. If you're this technician level, this is the curriculum you have to do. Capstone with what we decided to go with is SOCA certifications, and then eventually you get a completely custom course load. and then because you pick what certification you want.
Mhm.
We saw SACA as kind of a good option to capstone these curriculums because it's not me or Tammy or a group of our employees coming up with the tests and the information. They're developed by industry partners, which helps a lot because these industry partners know what we are looking for,
Yeah.
skills and knowledge. So they develop them. It's a third party thing, so it remains completely impartial. And it really, I would say the SACA certifications do a pretty good job having a very well-rounded coverage of particular areas of, the technical fields. So, we decided to go with those to kind of showcase that, okay, not only did I do, 20 different classes on, Amitral, I can wrap all those together to form the big picture. I know the big picture, and that's where we kind of targeted SACA for, as well as the fact that they do have hands-on training options for that as well, or hands-on certifications as well.
Yeah, and that's I'm looking at the photo here, and I know you and Tammy earned your gold level certifications earlier on in the year. Would you mind sharing a little about that experience? What was that process like, and what was your thoughts on that whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, we ended up, doing the SACA certifications ourselves, because the idea being that if this is something we're going to ask our employees to do, we should probably know what it entails and be able to answer their questions and speak to it. So we went ahead, we got our silver level, which is, I refer to as like the knowledge-based version. That's where the e-learning comes into play. And then Lab Midwest, you guys were hosting a gold test. So went ahead and left work for a few hours to go do that. And that just takes everything that you were expected to learn and know during the silver testing and say, okay, now do it.
Yep.
So that's, that's really all it is. You're sitting there, you're given scenarios. We used the skill boss for the testing. There's scenarios that you would encounter in everyday life, out on the floor. X is happening, fix it. And then you do so, and if you do it well enough, you pass and you get a cool little certificate. If not, it's actually a good way to show where you need to improve and things to focus on. So that's kind of the gist behind getting one of those.
Yeah, and that's really cool, because everything that we do, we like to really ensure that it's industry relevant, and that, you're not just earning a certification just to have it. You're holding something that has a value, that you're going to be able to verify you have those skills, perform them, and also, kind of be proud of that. So shifting gears a little bit, we've come a long way since, our early on discussions and building out the program and kind of mapping out the curriculum and going from there. Would you mind describing the rollout plan? I know we're still kind of, learning and adapting as we move forward, but if you had to sum up your rollout plan and for the audience, what did that look like?
Well, I mean, the rollout plan itself, I don't want to get into the first, however many months, because that didn't work out too well. And that's kind of what pivoted us to what we're doing now. It's a lot of research, a lot of thought on the front end to build the curriculums, identify areas of need within the company and where those match up with, in our case, Amitral, and then build out the curriculums, give them a why they need to do it or why they should be doing it or want to do it. And in our case, they already knew about Amitral. It was already a requirement that they do it. So we rolled out a new version or a new program within our ranks that utilized Amitral. And we pushed that out to everybody, and I think better explain the whys. So our rollout was a little rocky at times, and it was pretty much everybody all in one shot. But I would say the hidden portion of that was there's a lot of time and a lot of thought and a lot of people talking about what we need as a company and how to do it, how to accomplish it. And then, yeah, our rollout was just everybody all at once.
Yep. And I know you guys went through multiple phases of that, and we were right there with you the whole time. And I like how you kind of focused on the why, because you could have all the solutions in place, but if the team doesn't understand the why, or you don't have that strong culture behind what you're looking to implement, then it's kind of it makes it a little bit harder. So focusing on that why was a key point. So this brings us to our last question, probably my favorite one out of the bunch. What is your vision, Dan? I know you've been kind of the bigger picture guy that, at Masters Gallery as involved, in reference to the training program. What do you foresee the future looking like?
I mean, in an ideal world, it pretty much starts at day one with an employee. Everybody's getting standardized level, entry level training. So we know everybody knows the exact same stuff. If you know more, that's great, and we'll be happy to take you. But if you don't know more, we at least know that, okay, after 60 days, you're generally up to this knowledge base, very standardized, very informative, very targeted towards our company's needs. Big future goal for that is a lot of the hands-on. But the biggest thing is building a culture where we actually have employees wanting to learn and keep their skills up. Again, I mentioned it earlier, the technology that we're seeing day in, day out seems to change. So, the big goal is to keep employees kind of hungry for that knowledge. Us having a comfortability in, every technician having a generally the same base level knowledge. And, I'd love to see one day being able to blend it with, our maintenance side, our operations side, really just getting people a little more familiar and with a stronger understanding of the technical aspects of their jobs, because automation's pretty in depth at times.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I know we've talked about, going through this and getting everyone 40 hours of training per year is kind of the gold standard that, you guys are aiming for as well, right?
Correct. Yeah, we try to, shouldn't say we try, we allow time for training on the clock, during your work hours, with the expectation that, our employees all reach a minimum of 40 hours of training per year, be it through Amatral or trainings with OEM, kind of like OEM specific training and that sort of thing, because the investment of 1 week's worth of training has a significant payoff when they can perform their jobs more comfortably and better.
Yeah.
And faster.
Yep. No, absolutely. Dan, that's my last question for you. Thank you for sharing your story. We're really excited to get some feedback and some questions from the group, but I'll pass it over to Melissa to let her go on to our next topic.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you guys so much. And Dan, I love what you said, that just that 40 hours investment in training just pays off enormously when the individuals are able to do their jobs better, the company profits and does better, and everyone's happier in the end. As Ivan teed up a little bit, if anybody has questions, just a reminder to use that Q&A box to submit the questions. And we've got one more segment and then we'll jump to those. So we've got some good questions coming in already, so keep them coming. But when we look at something like what the folks at Masters Gallery has done, it's incredible to see. And obviously what you've noticed is there's a lot of work and thought that goes into a really intentional employee training program. And so what we have done here at Lab Midwest, and what Matt is going to talk about, is how we don't need to reinvent the wheel every time, and you don't have to go through all of this alone and start from scratch. There are people who have put together incredible programs that you can deliver to your learners in a way that's customized to your own program. So Matt, I won't steal your thunder, but I will let you talk a little bit about what that could look like for all of our audience members.
Perfect, Melissa, and it's my pleasure to do that. And certainly thanks to Dan for really doing a phenomenal job, I think, of helping our attendees today understand both the huge opportunities and then maybe a couple of the challenges that go along with creating one of these solutions. The truth of the matter is that there are some challenges in creating custom training, but if we follow a handful of really tried and true steps, we can have a really successful outcome. And when I say tried and true steps, we've tried this and we've proven it with a lot of companies. One of the questions we get a lot of times is, hey, you know, we're a small company, we're 10, 20 people. This sounds like this is for the Fortune 500. Is that right? The answer is no. This is for everybody. And Ivan has worked with companies as large as companies that have 40 or 50,000 employees. And I think his smallest company has 7. His smallest customer has 7. So the topics and the solutions we're talking about today absolutely apply to companies of all sizes. And let's talk a little bit about the steps we go through with those organizations in setting up these custom training programs. So the first step is for us collectively with you to understand your technology. There are huge similarities in manufacturing, and I would tell you that probably 80–85% of manufacturing technology from one company to another is really similar. So almost every organization has programmable logic controllers. Almost every organization has variable frequency drives. They have sensors and devices. They're using AC/DC circuits. They're doing electric relay control. They are using pneumatics and hydraulics. I mean, you know, fluid power, mechanical drives, all of these technologies repeat themselves over and over and over in every manufacturing operation. But there are some differences. The truth of the matter is, if I walk into a machining company, I'm going to see certain types of technology. If I go into a metal fabrication company, maybe the technology looks like a little bit different. If I'm in a food processing company, difference is there. So the first thing we like to do is partner with our clients, with our customers, and walk the floor. And spending an hour or so just looking at the technology that your team is using, whether that's quality technology, measurement technology, manufacturing technology, we can get a really good idea of the types of things that we would want to think about training your team on. So that's where it starts, is with the manufacturing technology and what do we want individuals to be learning. So the second question is understanding your resources. And people might look at that and say, oh, you just want to know how much money we have, so we make sure we spend it all with you. No, that's not the kind of resources that we're talking about. The kind of resources we're talking about are this. The first one is proximity to a technical or community college. That's another frequent question we get, is aren't you just competing with the technical college? Aren't you competing with the community college that also offer business and industry or workforce training solutions? And the answer is no. We are partnering with those individuals. And I can tell you over and over and over again, in so many different endeavors, we've created partnerships between the technical and community college, the client, the end client, the OEM or the contract manufacturer, and our company and our resources and our partners. So it's all about a partnership. The truth of the matter is that technical and community colleges offer huge advantages: access to hands-on training equipment, established curriculum, awesome instructional talent and technology. But sometimes, a lot of times, employers want to combine the resources of flexible hands-on learning, where we can apply this learning anytime, take somebody off the floor for an hour or two, put them back on the floor, with maybe some of the more structured learning that happens at the technical or community college. So we want to understand that. What is your aptitude for e-learning? How long would the licenses be? What about the hands-on trainers that Dan talked about and the investments that they made there? So we need to understand what the resources are. Then we need to understand the learners. Every organization is different. Some companies have really well-established matrices for, this is a maintenance technician 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's my electrician 3, 4, 5, 6, what have you, with really in-depth skills matrices, really in-depth position descriptions. Other organizations may be a little less formal, but we want to understand who are the learners. What is their base level of knowledge? What are they coming to us with? So we spend a lot of time exploring your team members and understanding them and even talking with them, so that we make sure that we can customize the learning program specifically around your people, from your entry-level people, your machine operators, your machine tenders, to your electromechanical technicians, your maintenance technicians, people doing things like quality control and so on. So we really want to understand who are the people that we want to learn and that we want to train. From there, we can do custom e-learning. And so what we mean by that is that, and Dan referenced this, and so did Ivan, we have access to an unbelievable amount of information and amount of content for manufacturing technology. Let me just share some examples with you as we go through this. 300 different courses and more than 3,000 hours of content now that we can customize. Well, if it's 40 hours a year, it's going to take us a long time to get through 3,000 hours of content. Even we have some customers that'll do 100 hours a year of training, 2 hours a week with their team members. And it's going to take you a long, long time to get through 3,000 hours of content, even at 100 hours a year. So we go through all of the different content and we see how it applies to what we see in the specific manufacturing operation, from electrical systems, electronics, measurement and gauging, fluid power, both hydraulics and pneumatics, and hydraulics and electro fluid power, automation and mechatronics, so robot operations and mechatronic systems and smart sensors and smart devices. One of the most popular, people who have the ability to read drawings and read prints and read multi-view drawings and so on, and perform CAD operations, manufacturing processes. So somebody says, I'm in the powder coat business, or I'm in the heat treat business. Okay, then we have to look at how that will apply. Same for thermal and process control. We do a lot of that in the waste treatment area. In industry fundamentals. So we keep going. We've got content on machining for FANUC, machining for Haas, green energy, structural engineering, lean manufacturing, quality, workplace effectiveness, safety, you name it, there is content. But we have way more content than any one person is ever going to be able to get through. So we really need to think about how we custom apply that to specific learners. And when we get into the e-learning, by the way, it's important for us to understand this is not what I call your grandfather's e-learning. This is not putting a DVD or a YouTube video in front of somebody and say, here, watch this. It's highly, highly interactive. You can't sit for more than 20 seconds without interacting with the content. We're constantly doing knowledge checks. So we're asking a learner as they go through the content, are you comprehending this content? And if they're not, they can go back through the content again. It's about the competency, not the time spent in the learning. We can do pre-quizzes. We do post-quizzes to make sure that people have a concept and have an understanding of what it is that they learned, and lots of virtual skills. So we can actually go through and build an AC/DC relay circuit. We can build a electric control relay circuit. We can program a PLC. We can program a punch press. We can do these things virtually. Is that the same as the hands-on learning? No, not necessarily, but it gets us a long, long way there. Most of us in manufacturing are hands-on kinesthetic learners. That's what I was when I was in manufacturing. That's why I was interested and found my way into manufacturing. I like getting my hands dirty. I like being on the floor. I like being around machine cooling. I loved seeing a sea of parts on the dock at the end of the day and knowing that I had a part in making that. So we're hands-on people. We have to have a hands-on interactive way to learn. So before we get into that hands-on learning, I should touch on the fact that we have, because we work with so many clients, gathered a tremendous amount of information. We're using AI and machine learning and algorithms in our business to understand how our clients are using e-learning platforms and what patterns are repeating over and over and over again. And we're starting to build on those patterns. So when we talk about creating a custom learning environment, we don't necessarily have to sit down with you and say, oh, are you doing VFDs? Are you doing programmable logic controllers? What about blueprint reading? We know based upon the vertical that a company is in, what is most likely to show up on their learning matrix. And so what we have done, and I kept some of the words out of this matrix for simplicity so we could really get a concept. When we're onboarding a new employee, we can go through, everybody does the same thing. They want to learn lean, they want to learn safety, they want to understand basic measurement, standard work. Maybe as that employee advances, they want to know some AC/DC circuits and key performance indicators and basic programming. Same for maintenance, we can go quality and lean, and then we get into for maintenance, and that next level maintenance person, basic AC/DC and fluid power and mech drives, and then intermediate level content of that, and then advanced level content of those technologies, all the way to really highly advanced PLC troubleshooting, advanced mechanical drives troubleshooting, advanced mechatronics troubleshooting. So we can get really, really advanced, and those same patterns start to repeat themselves over and over and over. So we can have pretty turnkey solutions for you when we walk in the door. Finally, it's the hands-on learning that Dan was talking about. So how do we take the competencies and the e-learning courses that we're teaching and apply those in a hands-on fashion? So these hands-on kinesthetic people that spend their time in manufacturing, that have spent their entire careers in manufacturing because they like working with their hands, can get their hands on manufacturing equipment. And so it's all about alignment. It's all about alignment between your learners between your technology, the resources that you have available to you in terms of training options, and then customizing the e-learning or using a turnkey solution that matches the business you're in and providing those hands-on learning activities either at the technical community college or at the workplace. And with that, Melissa, that is what customized learning systems look like. We have done this thousands and thousands of times across all kinds of verticals, and we would love to add value to any organization that would have us. Back to you, Melissa.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. All right, audience, now it's your turn to ask us questions. We've got a couple in the queue. We'll ask those. And if anything else pops up, feel free to throw them in the Q&A box and we'll pose them to our presenters. So the first question here that was submitted was, I'm going to pose this one to Dan. So Dan, do all of your employees start at the same spot, or are you able to assess and start people based on what they already know?
They can be hired on at different levels based off previous experience and knowledge. However, we do have them kind of go through the whole curriculum from the start. Just again, it's all about standardizing the training. You know, typically speaking, the earlier level curriculums, the more experienced guys can breeze through real quickly. So we just like to make sure we have that standard base. But you know, we're a little flexible on, you know, kind of how people start and whatnot.
Awesome, totally. Matt or Ivan, this is a great question. I was thinking for us too, do you have any thoughts on how this could be implemented, the idea of assessment with another employer?
I know Ivan's doing a ton of this, so Ivan, why don't you take a shot at that question?
Yeah, the assessment piece is huge because, you know, last thing we want to do is start someone training with material that's kind of too remedial, and then on the opposite end, you know, maybe over their head. So we like to create custom assessments so we can home in and find the sweet spot for every individual that's going through the program and give them a tailored learning experience. And so the most successful programs that I work with, they're all doing some level of front-end assessments and post training assessments.
Awesome. All right, next question. Matt, I'm going to pose this one to you. How do you see virtual and augmented reality impacting employee training in the future?
That's definitely having an impact, and we have a number of clients that are using it as we speak. So I'll give you some examples. You know, when I worked in manufacturing, probably the worst day of my manufacturing career, one of them was when we had an individual who wasn't using their fall protection correctly and actually fell into a caustic processing tank. Fortunately, they caught themselves before they went past their knees, but that individual ended up in the hospital for about 6 months. So we can get into big trouble if we don't follow safety requirements. We can use augmented reality to teach people fall protection. Or, and I can tell you that if you've ever fallen off a building in virtual reality, and I have, you will never forget to use your fall protection again. We can do the same thing for things like lockout, tagout, or confined space entry. So there's huge applications there. I can also tell you that we're getting word of some of the hands-on training companies for some of the solutions we've talked about today, starting to integrate augmented reality so that you can do some of the skills that Dan has talked about without necessarily having a trainer in front of you. You do that, a training system in front of you. Instead, you do it in augmented or virtual reality. So for us, these are and not ors. It's not, do I do a hands-on trainer, or do I use AR and VR? It's a question of what is the best of both worlds. Am I teaching augmented reality, or I'm teaching welding versus augmented reality? And then I get into a hands-on trainer, and then I get into the weld booth and so on. All of these solutions can be combined to create really, really creative answers for answering the question, how do we train an employee and meet that person where they are?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Matt. The next question, I'm assuming this was pointed towards, you know, our Masters Gallery friends, but I'm actually going to take this one on myself because I'm not going to put them on the spot for this kind of question. But it's a great question, and it's fair because a lot of people want to understand how this functions. So the question is training tied to an increase in pay? And the answer is that all depends on the company for the most part, yes. And the reason I want to answer this, and I'll let anyone else on my team jump in if they want to, but we just had an incredible guest on the Tech Ed podcast who shared a story of an employer in Georgia who's putting their employees through a 12-week kind of boot camp rapid training program. Those individuals earn 8 SOCA certifications throughout that training. They earn incremental increases in pay throughout those 12 weeks. And then once they complete it and get their certificate of completion, they immediately get a 40% increase in pay. So just some awesome stories there of the benefit. Again, a great incentive as well. But as that employee is benefiting the employer, that employer can reward the employee with an increase in pay as they're doing more skilled work. My team, any more thoughts to add on that?
Yeah, absolutely, Melissa. I would say the answer is an unequivocal yes. And whether that's a direct increase in pay because the employer is tied increases into a skills matrix that says when you have these competencies, we'll increase your pay to X amount or Y amount rather. We see that all the time. The truth of the matter is that any employee that has additional skills eventually is going to get an increase in pay, whether it's automatically part of their employer's structure or not. We see it both ways, but I can tell you more and more times we're seeing people tie increases in pay to making the training an element of that solution. So it's not always necessarily, hey, complete this course, you get this money, but it is part of, you have to do that, you have to be to work on time and display the proper workplace initiative and other characteristics that the company is looking for, but tying that as part of the completion of training as part of the consideration for not just increased pay, but promotion as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. We got time for a few more questions. So there's a question here about because high schoolers were mentioned a couple of times. What about strategies for getting high schoolers interested in coming to work for the company after graduation? Dan, I know you guys are doing some cool stuff with your high school partnerships. I know you also, when we talked last week, you had some cool thoughts about why high schoolers are actually make great trainees. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we're starting to, build some partnerships with our local high school, our high schools, their kind of tech ed departments, to get some more targeted training towards what manufacturers actually need from, these 18-year-olds, these seniors who just graduated. So they come to us with at least some base level knowledge and skills for the jobs. And it makes them feel a little more comfortable applying as well, especially when they kind of see our faces, know our names, that sort of thing. And it's actually kind of beneficial for us because in the case of Amatrol, a lot of these schools are starting to use that to get these, freshmen through seniors, real base level knowledge. And so they can come to us after graduation, and it's a system they're already familiar with. It's nothing new or crazy. It's just a continuation of what they've already been doing, in some cases up to 4 years now. And it just continues to build on, their knowledge base, as they graduate. And that's really probably rapidly becoming our every company, I think's biggest pipeline for future talent is, the high schools and the technical colleges. As years go by, they're going to be more and more who we need to be tapping into.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. Thank you for that great answer. One more question, I'll pose it to my team. What do you recommend would be the best department or group of learners to start out with?
Yeah, I'll go. I'll take this one on. So I think that a good starting place is starting at the entry level roles. Most commonly, that's where all programs start, creating a system for taking someone who at various levels of experience, putting them through an assessment, and then training them on those base level manufacturing skills in order to make it easier for them to get through the door. So I'll tell a quick story. I was working with a company, a Wisconsin-based employer, and they were having a lot of trouble finding talent. But then on the same end, they were turning people away because they didn't have the base level knowledge or skill expertise to get an entry level role. So that seems like kind of like a counterintuitive. And so what we did was we created a program that, if someone does not have that knowledge, we can train them and get them in the door and then continue education from there. So I think entry level is always the way to go. Matt, any thoughts on that?
Well, I would say I agree with you. First of all, Ivan, 100%. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why we get entry-level employees into training programs, and retention is one of the key reasons. And then I would also suggest that industrial maintenance, machine operators, those positions are really, really popular as well. The more that we can have an individual working in and around manufacturing equipment up to speed on these technologies, the less downtime we have, the better our quality is going to be, and the more productive we're going to be. The ROI is just absolutely insane. So I would add to Ivan's really wise answer, certainly the maintenance and the equipment operators as well.
Great. Thanks, Matt, Ivan, Dan, and Tammy for joining us. What's next? So to contact us, you can always head over to our website. Ivan's email is right here. He would be your go-to person. But remember, you've got an email coming out this week with the recording to this webinar. We're going to include a couple of other things in that. We're also going to include a link where you can find the Titanium Economy book that Matt talked about, because he's right. Everybody here should read that book. It's fantastic. And the other is that State of Smart Manufacturing report. We'll make sure that you guys have access to that, because there's a lot of phenomenal data in there. As far as some of that skills matrices and anything else that you might want to see, some of these custom evaluations, or see what training might work for your organization, just shoot Ivan an email or reach out to us, and we'd be happy to do that. That's more custom. So we would do that on a case-by-case basis with your team individually. Be happy to connect with you and work with you moving forward. And so again, thank you all for joining us today. Have a great rest of your afternoon.